Hello, this webinar is titled The Pilgrim Story, God's Providential Care in the Voyage to the American Continent. Well, as we know, they had a vision that was bigger than themselves and bigger than just the religious freedom that they had while living in Holland. And this picture called the embarkation is actually on display, very large picture, in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Where did this kind of courage come from? Reflecting back on the initial decision in Holland to go and make this adventure to the New World, they had this discussion. More than a few, not among them, argued that such an undertaking was open to inconceivable perils and dangers. It was replied that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties and must be both met and overcome with answerable courage. It was granted that the dangers were great, but not desperate. The difficulties were many, but not invincible. For many of the things feared might never befall them. Other problems by provident care and the use of good means might in a great measure be prevented. And all of them, through the help of God, by fortitude and patience, might either be borne or overcome. True it was that such attempts were not to be undertaken without good ground and reason, rashly or lightly, or as many had done for curiosity or gain. But their condition was not ordinary. Their ends were good and honorable, their calling lawful and urgent. Therefore they might expect the blessing of God on their proceedings. Yea, though they should lose their lives in this action, yet might they have the comfort of knowing that their endeavor was worthy. Wow! What courage, bravery, inspiration, and faith in God. Well, some number of 100 pilgrims left the congregation of 300 in Leyden, and they sailed for a port in Southampton, England, where they were to pick up the ship, the Mayflower, and a secondary ship to travel with them, the Speedwell. On August 5th, 1620, they left. And on that date, they found that the Speedwell was springing leaks, and so they stopped at another port city, Dartmouth. Again, the repairs were attempted, and the Speedwell and the Mayflower set sail into the North Atlantic. Got off the end of the British Isles past Land's End, but the Speedwell continued to leak, and so they had to come back. It was later found out that the ship had been overmasted because the crew on that ship did not want to make the journey. But at that time, they had a decision to make. Leave the Speedwell behind, proceed with just one ship, which made it imminently more dangerous. Substantial provisions had already been consumed in these attempted departures with both ships. It was late in the season to be going. More would have to stay behind than the ones that had committed to travel, and yet the decision was made to go. And so they boarded the ship and set sail from Land's End on September 6th, 1620. This would normally be a 21-day journey, but it took 66 days, 9 weeks. Think about 102 people in a 1,200 square foot house for 9 weeks, and just the human condition and problems that would cause. There was 102 passengers. 52 of these passengers were pilgrims, consisting of 18 families. There was 26 captain and crew, and 24 others, which were merchants, as well as colonists and other people that had specific skills that would be able to set up this new communal system that they were going to endeavor on. Well, on the crossing, they experienced many things. Firstly, there was a mocker. One of the younger sailors was mocking the pilgrims for their faith, mocking them as they became seasick, telling them that their belief in God was foolish. Well, after a few days of this, he caught a strange illness and died. The crew threw him overboard, and after that point, no one on the crew mocked the pilgrims because they thought that this was God's punishment on the mocking sailor. Second of all, they experienced a few storms, one of particular noteworthiness, where the ship was tossing to and fro and a main beam began to crack. Providentially, they had packed a large printing screw, undoubtedly to raise timbers in the New World, and that printing screw was able to be put underneath the main beam and screwed up, and so that the main beam stayed intact and in place, and the ship was saved. All of this travail and this storming situation blew them off their course. Where they were originally heading toward the Virginia coast, they ended up in the Massachusetts Bay area, Cape Cod specifically. Land was sighted on November 11th, 1620. Was this coincidence or providence? Well, they came upon shore. They dedicated their trip and their lives to God's care in this new world. Bradford says this about their arrival. I cannot make a pause and stand half amazed at this poor people's present condition, and so I think will the reader too when he considers it well. Having thus passed the vast ocean and that sea of troubles before while they were making their preparations, they now had no friends to welcome them, nor inns to entertain them and refresh their weather-beaten bodies, nor houses, much less towns, to repair to. Before them was a vast wilderness, behind them a vast expanse of ocean, with a small hope of further help from England. What, then, could now sustain them but the Spirit of God and His grace? Here's another artist rendering of the Pilgrims' landing, and a second one as well. As they looked around, they found no Native Americans on the specific area they landed. Meanwhile, all up and down the east coast of the United States, Native Americans had inhabited the lands. They found well-drained land, and they had seen that it had been vacated earlier by tribal people, but never reoccupied. Come to find out, an illness had greatly impacted that tribe, so there were none left when the Pilgrims landed. And the other surrounding tribes did not want to occupy that land because they felt like the Great Spirit had done some kind of activity there, and so they didn't want to occupy that land where the other tribe had perished. On the trip over, no Pilgrim lives had been lost, which would be unusual for a journey of this nature. In fact, 2 babies were born. One, Oceana Hopkins, was born on the trip over on the Mayflower, and then Peregrine White was born while the Mayflower was at anchor in the harbor. Thus ended their voyage, and God's providential care through the storms, through the protection of the main beam, and through their unoccupied landing of a piece of land of the entire up and down East Coast that was not occupied by Native American peoples. That summarizes their providential journey here. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.